Escapism describes the desire to escape from ordinary life into a fantasy. It's become a popular genre in literature and films, and it describes stories that often take place in a world that is different from our own, and in doing so, it pulls the reader out of their day-to-day life. Society often frames escapism as bad or avoiding reality, but I believe this isn't necessarily a weakness, but rather represents one of our deepest psychological needs. Escapism is defined as the tendency to seek distraction and relief from unpleasant realities, especially by seeking entertainment or engaging in fantasy. And while there's still a lot of stigma around escapism, it being seen as just wasting time or living in fantasy, I believe it's something that can truly help us grow. Jung viewed our imagination as the bridge between the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind, and to him, the whole idea of self-actualization was about bringing the lost unconscious parts of your personality back into consciousness, bringing them back into your life. And imagination was one of the ways to do so. Therefore, I think escapism can become a way to help balance our psyche, a way of compensating for what is missing in our daily life. Think of your favorite stories, characters, movies. You will have ones that you are drawn to, and this is often because they have something that you secretly desire in yourself. The mind, especially through our imagination, is always seeking to restore balance, and the stories that we feel most drawn to often hint at what it is we're missing in ourselves. Humans have sought out fantasies and stories like this for as long as we can document the written word. You can look at the Odyssey, which tells about Odysseus' journey back home after the war, and on his journey he encounters several magical creatures, cyclopses, sirens, and even has to deal with wrathful gods along the way. And this is something that none of us in our life will be able to relate to. These are experiences none of us have ever had, and yet for some reason, these kind of stories still remain relevant today. And I believe the reason why these stories are so powerful, even though they have no apparent benefit to our real life, is because they have one very important function, and that is the power to transform us. Myths are proof of this. They have the power of evoking an inner transformation in the reader. Joseph Campbell has explained that all myths, all stories, tell not of a physical journey, but a psychic one. The heroes of myths often escape out of the ordinary world and they venture into some other world where they face challenges that they must overcome. In this way, stories seem to contain life lessons wrapped up in metaphor that we can learn from, we can absorb, and we can actually apply this to our own life. It's just like the age-old writing tip: identify a problem in your life, find a metaphor for it, and turn this into a plot. There's your story. And this is also why we can relate to and see ourselves in stories that otherwise have absolutely nothing to do with us and our lives. So escapism then becomes a tool for transformation. And yes, of course, if we only seek this escape without ever turning back to reality, then of course that's unhealthy. But if we turn to our favorite stories in times of difficulties and learn from them, find something to bring back into our own life, then this is exactly what can help us in dealing with our own challenges and growing as people. For me, growing up, I really loved Harry Potter, and I would often daydream about it. I used to imagine that if I could escape into this world, that I would be happier, that I would be able to be the person I actually want to be. But what I realized is that this escape, this daydream, was really just a way that I would project the qualities in myself that I wanted to express onto a world where I felt I could do this because I didn't feel they had a place in my own. Especially the character Hermione is one that I really clung to. I admired her so much. She was independent, she was ambitious, she was always pursuing her own goals. And after a while, I learned to use this fantasy as a way of dealing with difficulties in my own life. I would, for example, imagine myself as this character in order to confront the things I feared feared or avoided. And believe it or not, it actually worked pretty well. When I would, for example, have to give a presentation because I was very shy in school, I would just imagine myself to be in this other world, and in a way, it would make it easier to confront this. I would ask myself, what would Hermione do? And what if I just pretended to do that for a while? It was a way of living half in fantasy and half in reality, but by actually merging these two, I was able to bring the qualities that I admired in these fantasies into my own life and start to learn to embrace these in myself. Now, the powerful thing about escapist fiction or media is that it manages to maintain the human element of the story, the emotions, the internal conflict, the dilemmas, while also stripping away the gray reality of life. It shows us a world where we can project ourselves into and discover who we are, who we want to be, completely separate from our normal adaptation we carry around with us for day-to-day life. All the things like our responsibilities, social obligations, problems that we become so attached to but also avoid, none of that exists in this other world. Just think, in your real life, you may hate what you do and be too afraid to take risks, but when you read The Lord of the Rings, you can daydream and imagine yourself in Frodo's shoes and what it would be like to find in yourself the courage to set out on an adventure to save Middle-earth, or to be Chihiro from Spirited Away, to set out on a quest to save her family, or even Harry Potter, who has to sacrifice himself for the greater good. All of these stories also have another thing in common. There is no normal world that they can return to. Often, in these kind of escapist stories, we have a character who is swept out of their normal life, and they must face many challenges and obstacles in order to save whatever it is they love. Frodo wants to save the peaceful life of the Shire. Harry wants to save his friends and loved ones, and so does Chihiro. In a way, they all have nothing to lose because everything in this story is stripped down to its simplest form, which is the courage to do what is most meaningful to them. It is this pursuit of meaning that gives all of these characters the strength to set out on their adventure. It gives them hope and purpose, and that, along with having nothing to lose, is what makes them the hero of the story. And if we're completely honest, they probably wouldn't be heroes if it were any different. If Frodo had a perfectly safe and normal life in the Shire, nothing was threatening him, and he were asked to take some ring to Mordor, he would absolutely tell Gandalf to get lost. Without this loss of normality, what reason would there be for these characters to face the challenges they do? None. And perhaps that's how we feel in our life. Some part of us wishes to be whisked away into some fantasy world to receive our call to adventure, where we can finally realize just how much we're capable of, where we can be ourselves and achieve something that is meaningful. Jung describes this feeling as the call to individuation, which is all about realizing your unique potential as an individual. And I believe this is what draws us to these stories. We fantasize and daydream, and we look at Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings, and we imagine ourselves as the heroes in these stories, in a world that offers a different glimpse of ourselves than the one we live in now. In a way, escaping into these stories becomes a question to ourselves of what could have been. Tolkien describes fantasy as a way of achieving recovery, which is the process of gaining a clear view of reality, seeing things as we are or were meant to see them, as separate from ourselves. He uses the metaphor of a dirty, smudged window where the grime on it obscures what we see through it. And in this way, he illustrates how fantasy helps us clean our windows so that the things seen clearly may be freed from the drab blur of triteness or familiarity, from possessiveness. This recovery allows us to perceive the world anew. It restores wonder and meaning that has been obscured to us through familiarity. In other words, he views fantasy as a way to recover a refreshed view of the world and perhaps even ourselves. Think about it. On its own, the whole idea of halflings, Middle-earth, and wizards should be entirely foreign to us. It should be completely unrelatable, but it's not. We see ourselves in every character. In Frodo's idealistic desire to do good, his relationships with Sam and the Fellowship, Aragorn who must overcome his self-doubt and guilt in order to lead, and heck, even Boromir represents a side in all of us, tempted by recognition and pride, even at the cost of his own morality. These are the kind of stories we feel so deeply. We feel the pain and desire of every character because we also experience this in our own life. And this is exactly why we can learn and grow from these stories. When Frodo doubts himself, his strength and ability to make it all the way, he turns to Sam. And he realizes he isn't alone. He doesn't have to do it all by himself. And even when he falls, it's okay, and all isn't lost. Their journey tells us that there will always be difficulties along the way, that nothing goes as planned, and even if you don't know how to get to where you're going, you only need to take the next step and have faith that somehow things will work out. It's a story where every single character is trying their best and they still fail, but they are forgiven and it's all okay. And it's in this way that escapism can help us in our own lives as well. You don't just have to dream of what you would do if you were the chosen one or swept into a world of spirits, magic, or whatnot, because all of these stories show us lessons that we can use in our life right now. Think about your favorite characters and stories. What exactly is it in them that you fantasize about? Is it maybe the feelings of connection, purpose, motivation, power? Once you can identify this, you can look at this area of your own life and see how you can apply the story's lessons to yourself. For example, what is your ring that you are too afraid to pick up, knowing it will come with countless challenges and difficulties, maybe even knowing you might not yet be strong enough to carry it? Just like Frodo shows us that no matter how small or inexperienced or frightened we may be, with dedication and an unwillingness to give up, we can also achieve the most difficult tasks in our life. I can, for example, look to Hermione, who faces any challenge head on. She prepares, she believes in herself more than anyone, and simply does what needs to be done without hesitating or letting her fear and emotions hold her back. And to be honest, this is something I need to embrace more in my life instead of just living through her. As with all things, too much indulgence in escapism can be harmful because it makes us forget about the life we are currently living. Unhealthy escapism will turn into dread and we begin to neglect our own life, and that's why I believe it's important to have a distinction. When it comes to escaping into these stories and fantasies, you have to be very honest and ask yourself, do you return stronger from it, or do you remain stuck? I really believe healthy escapism can become nourishment for us. It can help us through new perspectives and lessons that we can use for our own life, whereas unhealthy escapism becomes entrapment because we live entirely in the fantasy and we let our own life die. However, without all these stories and fantasies that we can project ourselves into, we might never realize what is missing in our own life. As Tolkien puts it, we get stuck looking at the world through a grimy window. And this is why escapism can help give us a new perspective. We imagine ourselves in situations different from our own, and through this, we may discover parts of ourselves that we are not fully living. Escapism as a genre isn't just about leaving life, it's about returning renewed. Think about it, all of these stories, fantasies, myths, they represent the hero's journey, but this isn't only an external journey, it's not literal, but like Campbell said, it represents an inner journey that can transform all of us, that every single one of us can go on. We leave the ordinary world, we head into the adventure world where we overcome challenges, but through doing this, we also regain that lost part of ourselves that Jung says, when we bring back, will help us fulfill our unique potential in life. And this is the power we can find in escapism. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to know what some of your favorite stories are, what your thoughts are on this. Please let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.